And today's question is, what is the best fertiliser to use to initiate early spring growth? Now, this is particularly relevant to golf. You know, they've got the Masters that they want to sort of get through unscathed. And so traditionally, golf would have kind of wanted to establish growth, but it's actually relevant to all areas of turf. You know, there's lots of reasons why in spring you want to initiate recovery. It might be to recover from damage through wear and tear, like for sports fields and stadium pitches and all this and the other. It might be disease on whatever area it is. So look, it's important and it's relevant to all sports. So the question is, what fertilizer do we need to go with if we're going to initiate spring growth?
Okay, thanks, Henry. There's a lot involved there, and so I want to simplify it down a little bit. So let's just think about nitrogen. And so if we think about nitrogen, well, the grass plant, even in cool conditions, can take up a number of forms of nitrogen. And we would say, so we've got nitrate, we've got ammonium, but it can also take up the amine, the NH2 that we see in amino acids. It can also take up urea, if we're honest. But let's not think about urea and amine. So let's just focus on nitrate and ammonium. And there is a little bit of confusion in the industry, I think, or wider in general, because we read a textbook, it says nitrate is the dominant form of nitrogen that's taken up. And that is true to a certain extent, because in a normal healthy soil, we would look at the nitrogen cycle, and that would show us that organic matter is broken down into ammonia, a process that we call mineralization, and then ammonia is further transformed to nitrate, a process we call nitrification. And so the plant experiences a lot of nitrate. And so that is the form it regularly takes up. But there's no barrier to the plant taking up ammonium, and the plant can take that up directly. And some plants actually prefer to take up ammonium, or they're best suited to that, even in cool conditions. So when we contrast the two, I don't think it's fair to say that there's a best form of nitrogen to be taken up. It's more like they're both available to the plant and they both can be taken up. However, I believe, and I've seen there are more issues with nitrate in early spring applications than there are with ammonium. And those issues would be that nitrate's actually quite inefficient. Okay, it's soluble and it's an anion, NO3-, which means that it doesn't get held up in the soil. So if we apply a nitrate, we get heavy rainfall, it dissolves freely and it moves with that water potentially below the rooting zone. So we're not utilizing, all that we put on. The second inefficiency is actually commonly seen in some sports soils where we have a buildup of organic matter at the surface, and we can have the organic matter holding on to a lot of moisture. And the nitrate in those situations under anaerobic conditions can actually denitrify, and we lose some as nitrogen gas. Now, there's a few steps involved in that process, but it takes place under anaerobic conditions, which we can see in the thatch layer. So for those two reasons, nitrate is a little bit inefficient. And I always go back to remember a book I always used to recommend when I was teaching, which was the Adams and Gibbs book. I don't know if you've come across it, Natural Turf for Sport and Amenity. And it's quite interesting because they say in their nutrition chapter that they believe in sports turf settings, because of the inefficiencies of nitrate, there's a lot more ammonium taken up than nitrate. But they don't really supply the research evidence to back that up, but their understanding is that the nitrate is fairly inefficient because of that. I guess there's a slight additional point as well in that, the plant takes up nitrogen because it needs to make amino acids, and that's an energy consuming process. And if it takes up nitrate, it has to convert the nitrate to ammonium and then the ammonium to the amino acid. Whereas if it takes up ammonium, that can be converted directly into the amino acid. So there is a lower amount of energy required by the plant. So you might think that in poor conditions, with low carbohydrate or very little photosynthesis going on, nitrate applications may be even a drag on the plant. But I would need to find some research. I don't think there's been anything specific done on that for sports turf, for example, but it's interesting.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's kind of, quite theoretical. But what have you seen in your trial work? Because obviously we sort of put these things to the test. What have you seen sort of to back up your sort of opinion that sort of ammonium might be the best way of proceeding?
Yeah, or an efficient way of proceeding, let's
Yes.
say. So yeah, you're right. We've done lots of trial work, and I'm sure many of the viewers will have seen our cold start studies, where we looked at Green Master Cold Start with the intention of applying that to increase growth early in the season, to grow through top dressing and provide a great surface, and it performed really well. But maybe I also want to link to some other research we did. We run a lot of disease trials, which will often run through the autumn and into the spring. And we had one trial a year or so ago where we had a number of treatments that were fairly badly ravaged by microdochium, and we wanted to look at their recovery in the spring. And so, we selected a fertilizer. We actually used Invigorator Plus out of our Green Master Prolite range, so a 4014 with 8% iron as well. But we made the application really early, so a spring application. Now, in that formulation, there's no nitrate, it's just an ammonium nitrogen formulation, and we got great recovery. Obviously, we got colour up from the iron, but we also saw that early season growth to fill in those disease scars and provided a significantly better quality surface, into March, into those sort of early season days when golfers are looking to get back and play. And there was no nitrate going on there. That ammonium wasn't needed to have been converted to nitrate to take up, although some of it might have been. Soil temperatures would have still been cool, but the plant was able to utilize that ammonium fine.
Okay, so I mean, I've done trials in this area, and actually you do get a response from all the different forms of nitrogen. But you're right, some are more efficient than others, and I've always found that early on in the year that sort of the ammonium-based fertilizers perform really, really
Yeah.
nicely.
I've got one other thing to add, I guess, would be that we do need to be cautious about over applying nitrogen in any form early in the season. By applying nitrogen, the plant will be drawing upon its carbohydrate resource to stimulate growth. And if we're under low photosynthesis or have low carbohydrate store, there can be a cost on the plant at that stage. So we would always be cautious about not applying excess nitrogen in the spring. But some is essential, and obviously, you would take a view of your plant hardiness and resilience in terms of your applications at that time, I think. There's so much more I could say here, Henry. There's lots, but maybe I should leave it there.
Yes.
If it's worthy of a longer webinar, please,
Yeah. I
tee
mean,
me up.
the one thing,
Um,
we should say that soil temperature is kind of, is the
yeah,
key driver. So, you do need to have soil temperatures, 5, 7 degrees before you're going to get any kind of response, because it's dependent on the sort of functionality of the turf grass system. But certainly, actually, we find that sort of, early applications with these mild autumn and winters we get in the UK and Ireland, then we can get responses really early on in the year. There's one more thing I want to touch on, because I've just mentioned Ireland there, Andy, and soil pH can be an issue here, can't it? If we're advocating sort of ammonium-based fertilizers in Ireland, they've got sort of soils that are of a higher pH generally, and that might change the recommendation slightly.
Yeah, I think we should always be wary of that if we're talking about nitrogen efficiency. You know, nitrate suffers from these inefficiencies in terms of its leaching, in terms of its nitrification. But at high pHs, ammonium suffers from volatilization, particularly if it's sitting on the surface for long periods. So under high pH conditions, you can still use ammonium, but you shouldn't, you know, over apply and leave it hanging around for ages. You want that granule to dissolve. You want the ammonium to move into the root zone, to be hopefully held up by the CEC, so that you're not getting that volatilization off the surface.
Great. Nothing is ever simple in this life, is it? But hopefully that has shed some light on the subject. And yeah, hopefully we'll come again in the next few weeks and ask Andy to hopefully clarify some other issues for us. So thank you very much, Andy. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Thanks.